everyone hear me okay? Yeah. Excellent, excellent. Well, this is always the moment where, again, I would say to Douglas, thank you very much for using half my material. I didn't prepare anything this year, so thanks for that, Douglas, for not saying all the things that I should have said. So we'll figure it out as we go. I do have a few notes, so I shall pop these in here, and that'll keep us going, hopefully. So obviously a few bits of housekeeping first. Hopefully it doesn't happen, but if there is a fire, then the fire alarm will go off and we'll get out of here. So I know the drams are good, but don't stay drinking them. Let's get out of here. A couple of things. So the other thing that we have today, the other thing that I was told to mention by Joanne, bottle collection. If you guys have reserved any of the superb festival bottles, last year we had them outside. This year we don't. It's going to be down in the courtyard. There's lots of friendly people who'll be able to direct you to the bottle collection. So that's a good bit of housekeeping to start with. Drink responsibly. I'm looking at all of you here, all of you. This is a marathon, not a sprint. So there's lots of drams. They're all cask strength. They're all kind of high strength whiskies. So let's enjoy them. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of drams to taste today. A couple other things that I was thinking about for this kind of intro. Last year, you may remember, we had some of our long service kind of awards. So staff who'd been here for 20 years. After 20 years working here, they got to come to the Masterclass. I don't know what first prize was, but second prize was coming to the Masterclass. We don't have anyone here who joined in back in 2004, except me. I joined in 2004. I technically, I left in 2005 and came back again in 2006. So I'm going to have to wait another couple of years, and I won't get into the mechanics of that story. No, I really won't. Not with my wife sitting here, no. And now look this way, the whole Masterclass. Yes, there is no long service staff here, but hopefully I'll be looking forward to sitting in the front row in a couple of years. I don't know who's doing the Masterclass then. Frankly, I don't care. It'll be somebody else. Any volunteers? There's a sign-up sheet around the back of the office for later on. And the other thing is, I believe that we're live streaming this, so it's being filmed. I think that's correct. Yep, good. Now, obviously, live streaming a whiskey tasting where everyone else is drinking, you're not. There's probably not many people watching. I know there is one person watching. So if everyone would like to kind of find a camera somewhere, and there we go. There's our camera right there. So can we all just say hello to my mum who's watching at home? Hi, Mum. Hi, Mum. She'll be delighted, I'm sure. So there we go. So that's a little bit of an intro. And then now what I'd like to do is start to talk a little bit about the whiskey, which is really why we're all here. So the whiskies we have today, the festival whiskies we've released. We have a Bruichladdich, a 10-year-old Bruichladdich, which is aged in a series of kind of quite exotic casks, quite unusual casks, to really showcase some of the kind of the crazy stuff that goes on behind the scenes. So our Bruichladdich this year is aged in a mixture of sweet wine casks, so some from France, some from Austria, and it's actually some really interesting casks, some sherry casks, some Pedro Jimenez sherry casks that we get from Fernando di Castilla. So it wouldn't be a masterclass at Bruichladdich without me saying Fernando di Castilla. Talking about Jan Peterson and the team down there, they do an amazing job making amazing sherry. And a few years back, Jan was on the phone and he had some really interesting casks. He wanted to tell me about. There was some PX casks, so antique Pedro Jimenez sherry. So they'd aged Pedro Jimenez for kind of 20, 30 years. They were very old casks, but he had then used them to age brandy that he had made himself. So I thought it was very interesting. We'd never done that before. It sounded like a nice experiment. So we filled some 2013 Bruichladdich into those casks, and we stuck them away in Warehouse 5. And they were always quite intriguing because we'd never used them before. I would come back every now and again and taste and see how they developed. And yeah, so basically for this year, the Bruichladdich Festival release is a beautiful mix of nice sweet kind of sauterne and kind of sweet wine and Bruichladdich and this PX and brandy cask mix. So it's really interesting. It's a beautiful, beautiful dram. So that's what we have to start off with. And it got me thinking about what we would do for the masterclass, thinking about these amazing drams. And it's really exciting, to be able to pool whiskies together that you guys don't get to taste very often. Or in fact, of these whiskies here, none of them are available for sale. We're only going to be able to taste them today, which is quite exciting. The Port Charlotte whiskey we have, so we'll do a Bruichladdich and a Port Charlotte. The Port Charlotte is aged 20 years, which is, for Port Charlotte, about as old as it gets. I don't think anyone in the room really has tasted many 20-year-old Port Charlotte whiskies. And actually, some of the drams today we're going to deconstruct, so we'll come back to the Port Charlotte a little bit later. But again, what we're doing there is we're using some sauterne casks, some bourbon casks, kind of blending those together. And again, thinking about those amazing casks, what we always try and do with the masterclass is showcase the treasures. The things that we have maturing here that are unique and experimental and, kind of the exciting things, the really cool things. Also with the masterclass, I like to showcase as much as I possibly can all the things that make Bruichladdich, all the things that make us who we are, all of the passion, the skill, the hard work, the teamwork, the blood, the sweat, the tears, all the things that go into making Bruichladdich, because we live this day in, day out. And it's hard, making whiskey. Making whiskey doesn't just happen. There's a lot of effort that goes into making it. It's not as if you would throw some seed in the ground, throw some barley seed in the ground, and then as it grows, it just turns into whiskey. There's so much, as we all know. We're all whiskey enthusiasts. There's so much that goes into making whiskey that trying to showcase as much of that as we possibly can is really what I would always try and do with a masterclass. So we'll touch on lots of different elements today that really make us kind of who we are. And to talk about what we do. So yeah, showcasing those treasures. We've only got an hour and a half, so we'll I don't know if I'll be able to get through everything that makes us as special as we are. There's amazing things, of course, but we'll have to taste some whiskies as well. And really, as I say, for when I was thinking about the lineup here, the 6 drams we have in front of us, I started thinking about the whiskies we'd used for the Bruichladdich and for the Port Charlotte and those really special casks, those interesting things. And I wanted to go into the warehouses and I wanted to think about what are those amazing casks, what are those fantastic casks, those exotic things that make these special releases. And as I was going through and I was looking at the list, at Bruichladdich, it's quite nice. We've got 2 bourbon barrels sitting here. At Bruichladdich, we fill a lot of our whiskey into bourbon barrels. And we do that for a very good reason. So when I started thinking about all these exotic casks we could be tasting, actually I thought, let's focus on all the casks and actually give the bourbon cask a bit of a place, because quite often it's overlooked. A bourbon barrel here, of course, it's been used. It's American oak. It's been used in America, in Tennessee, Kentucky, for making bourbon whiskey, aging bourbon whiskey. There are millions imported into Scotland every year. A couple of weeks ago, I was out in Glasgow at an event with a cask supplier, and I got chatting with a guy who worked for a different company, and he was saying that he imports about 4 million of these every year. That's just one guy bringing in 4 million for one company. We're about probably filling about 4,000 of these a year, so slightly lower, but still they're very, very important to the whiskies that we make. So the bourbon cask is kind of the unsung hero. It's kind of taken for granted. Most of the whiskey maturing in Scotland, 90% of the whiskey maturing in Scotland, will be aging in bourbon barrels. So let's give that a little bit of a focus. So I'm going to talk you through the drams we've got today. So obviously in your tasting mat in front of you, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They're all labeled to keep us right. It's for your benefit, but also for our benefit when we're pouring. All the drams, so we know which one goes in which. You haven't all got the same dram there. They're all different. So dram number 1 is a 2005 Bruichladdich. Okay. So it's a 2005 Bruichladdich. It's aged in bourbon. It's a single cask. It's cask number 575, filled in 2005, maturing in warehouse 14. So if we were to go through there and up the hill, warehouse 14 is just behind us. 25C is the location. If anyone's interested afterwards for a cash donation, I can show you to the cask with an empty bottle. Of course, I am thinking of saying these kind of things, and there's a retired customs and excise person here. So that's actually wiped out about half of my speech and the stories that I can no longer tell. Now we have. do you still have connections with customs and excise? Hopefully not. But so yeah, I'll have to find some gap fillers for these stories. So it's a Bruichladdich, it's bourbon, and the reason I've selected this at 2005 is because that's kind of the sweet spot of the distillery. You know, that kind of age. I've talked about this before when we've tasted 18-year-old whiskies in the past, that kind of age between 15 and 20, aged in bourbon, is where Bruichladdich is in an absolute sweet spot. So we'll have that dram to taste first. Dram number 2. Number 2 is quite an interesting one. It's a 2009 Bruichladdich. It's aged in Amontillado sherry casks. So you can see just by looking at it, the color is really, really deep, really rich. So that's a real treat to talk about later. So again, we can think about some of these exotic cask types. Dram number 3, we'll go into Port Charlotte. Again, I'm going to start off with a bourbon cask. Dram number 3 is a 2003 Port Charlotte, aged in bourbon. I should say with these as well, they are all cask strength. They're all actually, in the tasting here, they all hover around the 55%. Some are 56. I'll go through the strengths as we taste each one. But they're all relatively the same, and they're all within that kind of 2003 to 2009 window. So it's quite a select kind of group. Again, it helps us to compare and contrast and think about the cask a little more if a lot of the other details are the same. So dram number 4 is, in fact, dram number 3 and 4, as I mentioned before, is deconstructing our Port Charlotte Festival release. So number 3 is a bourbon cask. Number 4 is a Port Charlotte in a Sauterne cask. And it's been in that Sauterne cask since 2002, which is not yesterday. This is a very old cask, but it's fascinating when we get into talking about that. Dram number 5 and 6, we're going to go to taste some Octomore. Dram number 5 is a 2006 bourbon cask matured Octomore. And dram number 6, I'm going to save to the end, the pièce de résistance. This is something to look forward to. So whatever you do, don't taste number 6 yet. So, I'm not exactly sure what time it is. It must be about 20 past, 11, 20 past. It's probably time to taste some whiskey. I know you guys probably have already. This is one of these things I should always say at the beginning of the whiskey tastings that I do. Please feel free to taste the whiskey. Don't wait for me to say, now we'll taste the whiskey, because you'll go thirsty. You'll be very, very thirsty. So dram number 1, again, this is really to focus, to calibrate, if you will. Because it's to kind of focus on that sweet spot of Bruichladdich. It's to focus on a bourbon cask maturation, which is, again, as the team know here, we fill a lot of bourbon barrels. You know, it's the mainstay of what we fill, and really because of the quality and because of the way those the flavors that we get from the barrel work. And for many years, I've 20 years pretty much, I've worked at this distillery, and whenever I try and talk about maturation, what happens when you put the new make spirit that we distill into a bourbon barrel, into any barrel, what happens? How do those flavors develop? There's mysteries that we don't know. It's complex. It's amazing. But we'll try and talk about some of those aspects, those flavors that come through. What I want to do first is to think about, again, this idea of calibration, this idea of thinking about distillery character, thinking about the flavors of the whiskey we produce. So, at Bruichladdich, when we make our whiskey, as I'm sure you all know, we spend a lot of time thinking about our ingredients. You know, making whiskey, as I touched on before, it doesn't just happen. We think about working with the farmers, the growers, The guys who are out there in the fields, the guys who put that barley seed in the ground and they raise that crop. Up it rises, then it heads off to the maltings, which is always a really important part of the process. Hello, Eddie. How's it going? So the malting process is really important as well. Obviously, creating those looking after the barley, creating those sugars that we can then distill. Through the process, as I say, what we're actually doing, the process we make at Bruichladdich, the way we make our whiskey, and forgive me if I talk about making whiskey at Bruichladdich without the benefit of actually showing you around the distillery and all these kind of things, but when we make our whiskey, it's very old style fashion, so that a lot of the equipment is very old. We do things very slowly, and we do that for a reason. One, we use this old equipment because when the distillery was reopened, that's what we had. There wasn't the money or the will to renew it. Actually, what we had was a treasure, being able to use this old equipment to make whiskey in an old-style way without the use of computers to allow people to shape the flavor of that spirit. For people to interact with those ingredients was really, really important. So people are a massive part of making whiskey. As I say, it doesn't just happen. We need to intervene. Then there's the mashing process. So when we mash our 7-ton mash, over the course of about 9.5 hours, we'll drain off that water and fill the washback. The fermentation, we're not waiting 55 hours, and then as soon as it's through 55 hours, we put it into the stills. The fermentation is long. We allow it to run its course. So average would be kind of around about 80 hours fermentation. As it goes to the stills, that spirit is then distilled in those lovely, elegant, kind of tall, narrow-neck stills we have at Bruichladdich, and that shapes our spirit. And all of these kind of things are starting to develop that distillery character. That in all of these whiskies we'll taste, we're going to follow that thread. We're going to pull that thread of distillery character through all of the whiskies. That's really, really important that when we distill, we have a character. Now, as you well know, at Bruichladdich we make Bruichladdich whiskey, which is unpeated. We make Port Charlotte, which is heavily peated. And we make Octomore, which is super heavily peated. We're talking 40 ppm for Port Charlotte. We're talking anything above 80 for Octomore. Huge levels of peat. I think we always explore that level. When we talk about 300 ppm, that's not unusual. It's something we've been able to achieve and bottle and release. So there we have 3 completely different brands, 3 different styles of whiskey. So how do we maintain that distillery character throughout? Well, part of it is through the way we distill, through those fundamentals of slow distillation, thinking about those cuts we take. That's really, really important. And part of it is, again, in the cask. When we distill, when we create that spirit, aging, using these bourbon barrels allows the flavor, the character of that spirit to really sing. So Bruichladdich is quite light. That's elegant. Let's take Dram number 1. I'm sorry, I'm catching up with you guys now. I know you're all enjoying it, but I'll join the party. Dram number 1. The lovely thing about this is, obviously, the team were in very early this morning, and thank you to everyone who helped set up all the drams. They were in this morning, they poured these drams, so they've been sitting, they've been able to open, they've been able to breathe a little bit. So Dram number 1, 2005 Bruichladdich. It's 55.6% alcohol, but when you nose that, the alcohol is not really the most dominant thing. What I'm getting there is lovely caramel, it's lovely fruit, it's this lovely kind of classic style of Bruichladdich. And the reason I chose this dram was, again, to calibrate, to think about what makes Bruichladdich special, think about that age. So here we are about 19 years old, 18, 19 years old, aged in bourbon. This is a classic Bruichladdich. And in all the years I've been working here, I've heard from the team, the people who've worked here in the past, about the sweet spot of Bruichladdich. Bruichladdich at its best between kind of 15 to 20 years old. In a bourbon barrel, that's where you'll get a great Bruichladdich. And that's absolutely what we have here. So that bourbon cask, that American oak, it helps shape that maturation of. To think about the spirit that we start with. Again, I touched on the Bruichladdich, the Port Charlotte, the Octomore. The next point I was going to make was, even when we make Bruichladdich, we're not trying to make it taste the same all the time. We actually, through Bruichladdich, make about 9 different spirit types. So when we make Bruichladdich, we use bear barley, which is an ancient strain of barley from Orkney. We use organic barley. So it's organically grown from a single farm up in the north of Scotland. We use biodynamic barley, which comes from a farm across the other side of the border in England. Controversial, I know, but interesting for us to think about where the barley comes from, how it's grown, how that affects the flavor. So we're looking to distill that for its distinct flavor. We have single farms from Islay. We have kind of a generic Islay where we bring together the produce of a lot of farms in the islands, mix them together. We have single farms from the mainland Scotland. So through the Bruichladdich range, we have a lot of difference. And we look to explore that difference. We look to create that difference so that we can broaden our flavor profile. But even although we're making all this difference, there is still that character, that distillery character that comes through. So we may start to think about that as we nose this whiskey. So what we always get with Bruichladdich is a new spirit, maybe slightly different balance. We're going to get a lovely malty character. So that long fermentation, that slow distillation, that slow mashing is going to bring through the flavor of the barley. So we're going to find that in the new spirit. There's a lot of fruit. Again, that long fermentation, that's where we get those fruity flavors, those esters, those congeners that are created in the fermentation process. They bring everything together, and we get this long fermentation, which develops that lovely fruity flavor. As we then move that wash into the stills, and we run our stills, we run things very slowly. We run things slowly so that we preserve a lot of the oils. And again, if you look up at that glass and you give that a bit of movement there, and you'll see the legs, you'll see the oils start to come down. So slow distillation is about preserving those oils, those flavors, those textures, and you'll start to see very slowly those legs come down. And you know, before you taste this whiskey, that it's going to be good quality. It's going to be viscous. It's going to be oily. It's going to have these amazing qualities. The other thing that's very important in creating that distillery character is the stills. The shape of the stills. You know, they're very tall at Bruichladdich, they're very long, they're very narrow, and we get a very elegant character in our spirit. So we're going to get that lovely kind of fruit. We're going to get lots of floral flavors coming through. And the reason I'm mentioning this now is so that as we taste these whiskeys, you're going to find the character through all of these whiskeys. So we set that character out. As it ages, particularly in a bourbon barrel, that fruit, which in the spirit is quite green, it's... so would you like to come up and take over? No? No. Oh, okay, all right. Sorry, I thought I was doing such a terrible job. Someone was just going to come in and take over, but that's it. Time out. Substitution. So where was I? Dram number one. That's completely thrown me. Where was I? Anyone? Fruit, absolutely, fruit. Thank you. So, at the beginning, the fruit, when you nose a new spirit of Bruichladdich, the fruit is gooseberry, it's kind of like a nice crisp pear, it's apple, it's this lovely kind of crisp green fruit. And as that ages, as we nose this whiskey, it's really fruity. I'm getting a lot of fruit there. But I'm not getting that crisp gooseberry, that sharpness. I'm getting a nice kind of stewed apple, it's pear, it's apricot. I actually obviously spent a lot of time for the last few days making notes and taste notes, so I should probably just check in and make sure that for this Dram I'm getting all of the right flavor profiles for you. But essentially, yeah, the fruit is one of the dominant factors, and then from the bourbon barrel, if you think of that American oak and when it's created, when it's toasted, what it gives us is sweetness and sugar. It's vanilla. It's coconut, and this is one of the interesting things that when you take a tree, you take an oak tree that's maybe grown for at least 100 years, 200 years, 300 years, grown in Kentucky, Tennessee. The species is Quercus alba, and they're fantastic for making barrels with. Now, from an oak tree, you'll maybe get about 4 barrels, enough to make 4 barrels. So they're a very precious resource. Obviously, it's really it's really important for us to look after that, and there's lots of things we do to refurbish barrels, to look after barrels, and to make sure that we treat them with respect, because this holds the whiskey that we make for years. You know, in the warehouses around us, I mean, here we are. You can see the whiskey maturing right next to us. So, when we take this Quercus alba, this tree, the guys out in America, the Coopers, the guys will... they will cut the tree, They will put it through the sawmill, they'll create those staves, and they will season the wood. Again, that seasoning is really important in terms of creating flavor. So again, if we just made a barrel straight away, then it'll be too tannic, it'll be too bitter, it wouldn't work. We need to season that for a long, long time. So we're talking years of seasoning. So 200 years to grow the tree, another 5 years of seasoning. We haven't even started making the whiskey yet. This is a long-term game. But when we get it, that seasoning and that once the staves are shaped, formed into a barrel, what happens in America is they char the cask, they heat it, they burn the inside. And what that does is it changes the components inside. It changes lignin into vanillin. It changes, it creates flavors like eugenol, which gives us that lovely kind of clove note, lots of spices, wood spices. So we're creating flavors. And there are hundreds of flavors identified that come from the wood. So that complexity that we're able to add by aging our spirit in this amazing cask is absolutely wondrous. The options are endless. So when I come to nose this whiskey, and I smell that vanilla and that caramel and that creme brulee, I know that the oak over the last 18, 19 years has looked after this cask really well. We've added, we've developed, and we've matured that whiskey. The peach, the apricot, the kind of the melon, kind of that lovely kind of ripe, juicy fruit. Again, that's what the bourbon barrel is doing. It's changing that fruit that we distill. It's changing it, it's evolving it and developing it so that the humble American bourbon barrel that everybody uses, that everybody fills, that's taken for granted, it works beautifully for our Bruichladdich spirit. So that is a fantastic dram to be able to nose. Hopefully nobody's tasted it yet, yeah? You're all waiting, yeah? Okay, maybe not. Let's have a little taste if you've got, some people have finished them already. Well, listen. For my first dram of the day, I would just like to say to everyone, welcome to Bruichladdich, welcome to our feast day, and Sláinte mhath. Sláinte. Thank you very much for the round of applause. Usually that means I'm finished, so I'll see you guys later. No, that's very kind, very kind. We'll maybe move into our second dram. So that first dram, just to kind of sum up, the things I really wanted to kind of focus on and talk about here is this is what makes Bruichladdich sing. Bourbon barrels are the backbone, maturing our whiskey in these casks. It's the backbone of what we do, and you can feel why, you can taste why, because that lovely sweetness, that lovely fruit, the way that whiskey is developed is incredible. So that's a single cask of Bruichladdich that was filled back in 2005. And here we have that bourbon cask that just shaped that whiskey. It's absolutely incredible. But we, of course, at Bruichladdich, and we're well known over the years for using a lot of different types of casks. And so dram number 2 is where we're able to focus a little bit on some other types of casks and how that affects the flavor. So for dram number 2, the first thing you'll notice, the first thing I notice about this is that this is a healthy measure, right? So every year at the Masterclass, I know with 250 people here, I need to fill about 10 bottles of whiskey. So I make 12, because that's more than enough, okay? More than enough. So these 12 bottles of whiskey we have, and we obviously fill it. The team obviously spent hours filling the glasses this morning. And when I'm obviously helping out as well, getting in the way, and I'm filling the glasses, when it hits that 25 mil, then I stop pouring, right? So if anyone's got exactly 25 mil, or less, then probably I poured that dram for you. But I will say that this is a very healthy measure, and I'm very, very glad that it's in my glass. I always worry about not having enough for everyone, so we definitely do. So thank you, Moira, for pouring these drams for me. They are healthy measures. I will enjoy them. When you look at that color, so again, at Bruichladdich, as you all know, this is something that we should take for granted. We do not use artificial color in any of the whiskeys we produce, whether it's obviously from the cask like this or in anything we put in a bottle. But when you look at that color is absolutely incredible. And this whiskey, this Bruichladdich, is a 2009. Okay, so I'll give you some of the details here. That's why I have the bottle, so I can remind myself. It's a 2009, and this is aged in Amontillado sherry. Okay, so it hasn't been in that cask for its whole life. Back in 2009, we filled a parcel of casks, and obviously the new spirit was being filled into some sherry casks. So a variety of different sherry casks were filled, for one filling, and they were tucked away in the warehouse. So that we'd have some first fill, some second fill, some various different bits and pieces, whatever sherry casks we had we needed to fill, we'd put them away. And then as time went on, we started looking at that, coming back to that spirit, seeing how it was developing. And actually, for our Bruichladdich Classic, so everyone knows our classic, you've all got 2 or 3 bottles at home, I hope? Yes? Yes? Good. 4 or 5 bottles? Excellent. Good. Good. So the classic is a mixture of a lot of different types, a lot of different components of Bruichladdich pulled together. And one of those components is aged in sherry casks. Because again, when we want an element of sherry cask in there, what you know is when you bring that glass to your nose is this beautiful fruit, this lovely dried fruit. So sherry casks bring fantastic flavors, and so we want to use some of that, a small amount in the classic to kind of bring its quality. And so what I'll do each year we make classic, and as we go through the recipe, is we'll select some sherry casks and then we will blend them together. So again, if we're filling PX or Oloroso, and there's first or second fill, there's a variety of different cask types to fill. And when we make classic, I want to make sure that sherry component is consistent in the classic each time. I don't want to have a Fino in one batch and a PX in the next. They're 2 completely different flavors. So we'll craft that component. We'll blend that component as a single entity to get the balance of flavor that we want, which we can then use in the classic in the amount that we want. So these casks were maturing down in Port Charlotte, and I went down and we had a look to see which cask we would want to blend for that component of classic. And when I went through the casks, there were 3 Amontillado sherry casks in that parcel, and they were too good to use in the classic. Now, I don't say that very often because, again, the classic is our house style. It's all of the good things that make Bruichladdich in there. So I don't try and keep the best whiskey for something else. Always the best whiskey goes into the classic. Always our best whiskey goes into every bottle we produce. But these Amontillado sherry casks were very rare, and I didn't want just to lose what was unique about them. So I kept those 3 back. And for the last 2-3 years, I've been thinking of a way of how to get this into the Masterclass. How could we do that? So basically, between this and Dram number 6, these were the 2 drams I was definitely getting in the Masterclass this year. And this one, because again, whenever you go to that cask and you pull a sample, that's just a great example of a sherry cask. Amontillado as a sherry, I don't know if you are familiar, but it's quite interesting because it has kind of 2 different types of aging. When you make a Fino or a Manzanilla, you have a floor over the top of the sherry, so it doesn't oxidize. For a PX Oloroso, it's different, so you have that oxidization. You get 2 different or very different styles of sherry. Amontillado starts off, the former, with the floor on top of the sherry, and then that is removed naturally or unnaturally, and it oxidizes and changes, so we get huge complexity in that sherry. So we filled these casks. There were 3 casks, as I say, and wow, when you nose that. Again, for those of you, I've just been talking about bourbon, and I love a bourbon cask whiskey, but this is, again, just to showcase the amazing things we have, those treasures, those jewels in the warehouse that actually really, really unique. So when you nose that, again, because it's had time to open, it's 56.6% alcohol. Man, when you nose that is all about the dried fruit. But I've just spent a good amount of time talking about distillery character, why that's important. And then what have we done here? We just aged this in a sherry cask and lost all that distillery character? Absolutely not. So let's think about nosing this. So you get the dried fruit. The sultanas, the raisins, the dates, the figs, the Christmas cake, that classic kind of sherry notes. But in amongst that, there's a lot of other fruit. There's a lot of that succulent fruit again. When you give that a little bit of time to open, and actually what I would recommend with this is a little splash of water. So a little drop of water in there. And you'll see those lovely natural oils start to mix and start to come together. It's absolutely beautiful. Oh. So now we're getting to that distillery character. I'm getting a lovely kind of digestive biscuit note, that maltiness that we always get with Bruichladdich. That lovely kind of nutty marzipan, praline, chocolate notes. And that fruit, that lovely kind of peach. So my Amy there was very, very excited. I think she got some of the tasting notes. Often if I'm doing things at home, I take some samples home, doing some tasting in the evening, and I'll write some taste notes and big screeds of all these different kind of flavor profiles. So, Amy, what do you think about that? And she'll go, yeah, that's whiskey, yeah, it's nice. And I say, what about the creme brulee? Are you going to get the creme brulee? Say, yeah, absolutely, yeah. So she humors me very well, and for that I'm forever grateful. But there was a lot of satisfaction about getting those taste notes there. So, but yeah, what you can see with that little splash of water, opening that up, is you get those lovely kind of geranium, those lovely kind of floral notes. You get that lovely. I hope no whiskey was lost in the because. When we fill, just think about all these glasses there in front of you. We didn't spill one drop this morning, did we? Not one drop. There we are. So, should we have a little taste? Again, I'm catching up with you guys. Oh, that's just beautiful. The influence of those sherry casks, oh my God, absolutely fantastic. I think, again, we've still got that distillery character as that finish is coming through. You get that lovely kind of fruitiness, of course, of the sherry cask, but also away from the dried fruit, you've got this lovely kind of peach, apricot note coming through. It's floral. Again, the sherry is not overpowered. It's a lovely kind of floral note coming through as well. Oh, absolutely fantastic. So the question is, what do we do with this whiskey? I've not used it for classic. What should we do? Should we do with it? That's the question. Maybe a little single cask somewhere. Maybe I'll just keep it here and drink it myself over the next 40 years or so. We'll see. But again, for customs and excise purposes, I won't do that. I won't do that. Of course. But it's a beautiful dram, a really, really interesting thing, and it's something I remember that there's a good story about this dram. It really helped to settle my nerves one day. I mean, I mentioned this is maturing down in Port Charlotte, down in the warehouses in Port Charlotte, and they are beautiful kind of old dunnage warehouses they're actually from the old Loch-and-Dole distillery. So. The village of Port Charlotte kind of grew up around the distillery that was built there back in 1829. So 1829, a long, long time ago, almost 200 years ago, or 195 years ago, pretty much. So the distillery there, Loch-and-Dole Distillery, was built in 1829, and the distillery closed in 1929. So it ran for exactly 100 years. And when you go down through Port Charlotte and you come into the village and you go through that little narrow bridge, and then on the left-hand side you've got the youth hostel, and that's old distillery warehouses, and on the right-hand side there's the old distillery manager's house, and behind that there's some warehouses. There's an old garage there that Douglas Klein, our engineer, ran for many years, and his father before him. And these buildings were all part of the Port Charlotte distillery. And actually, if you go into the courtyard behind that building, you can see in the ground the bricks and the things from kilns and various things, and the old buildings, the old walls around. So the distillery is long gone, but the warehouses at the back that we use, the Port Charlotte warehouses, have been used for maturing whiskey since 1829. And so these beautiful old stone buildings with fantastic, lovely wooden beams, big thick wooden beams from just absolutely beautiful atmospheric place to go and to mature whiskey. And so I was down there one day looking for, this was a good few years ago, I was down there looking for different samples and different things, and it's over 2 floors, so there's an upstairs and a downstairs. And I'd gone in the upstairs. And this, nowadays we've obviously been looking after the distillery, looking after the warehouse. We've got a new roof on there. We've renewed the electrics. Everything looks really good. But back in, a couple of years ago, you would have to put on the lights for each section individually. And they were all in little switch boxes outside each bit. Of course, I went in the top, so I put the lights on at the top. I didn't put any lights on in the bottom. And because I wasn't going to go down to the bottom, I wasn't looking for casks there. I was looking up the top. And I was looking through, and I couldn't really find what I wanted, so I thought, I've got my head torch. Put that on, and I went down the stairs. And again, there's this lovely quiet in the warehouses with these big, thick stone walls, So, you don't get a phone signal in there. So I spend a lot of time in there, actually. So you go in there, and there's this beautiful atmosphere. Everything's very calm. Everything's very quiet. When you walk past it, so the windows are basically just open with this metal bars to stop people escaping. There's metal bars in the windows, and basically it's just, you walk by and you hear the sound of the water running past, the burn running by the distillery. You get this lovely atmospherics. And so as I go down these lovely old wooden steps, it's pitch black, my little head torch on. Of course, I haven't charged the battery, so it's quite weak. And as I walk down, I go into P1, I walk through the door into P2, and I'm looking around for some casks to see where I am, and I look around, and I see a pair of eyes, 2 shining eyes, and I absolutely shit myself. Because we're in a locked building. I've just opened it, and there's again, in an old distillery like this, again, I've worked the night shift. I've done these kind of things where you see things that aren't there. You go into the mill house and you think you see a ghost and all this kind of stuff. And maybe I did, maybe I didn't, maybe I'm just tired, I don't know. But you see things you think aren't there. So when I go down the stairs into that warehouse, into P2, and I see those eyes, I absolutely panicked, shall we say. Sorry, Mum, for swearing before, by the way. So yes, my heart is racing, 10 to the dozen, and in this warehouse, what those little eyes, it was a cat. It was a cat, but of course they have, see the light reflects back, and it was like the devil or something was staring right back at me. But this cat scarpered, and of course I let out at this time a very manly, macho kind of scream at this point, and luckily no one was around to hear it. And I thought, right, well I should really need a dram to settle my nerves after that, and found 2009 Bruichladdich and Amontillado sherry cask, which soon made me forget about the cat. But it's a beautiful dram, a lovely dram, and yeah, I think for years, as I say, I've tried to get this into the Masterclass. Actually, last year at the 11th hour on the Saturday, so of course, we do this on a Sunday morning. On Saturday afternoon, I was thinking, right, I really want to get that Amontillado in there. I wonder if I blended some rye and Amontillado sherry cask. So there's samples made up of things that just didn't quite work, but there was, here it is in its glory by itself. It doesn't deserve to be blended. It's a beautiful cask as it is. So, dram number 2. So there we go. We'll move into some peated whiskey now with dram number 3. I hope that's okay. We're going to be heavily peated today because we've got 2 Bruichladdich, 2 Port Charlotte, 2 Octomore. Dram number 3 is, again, where we're going to kind of calibrate again. So I really want to show you what a Port Charlotte in a bourbon cask in that kind of lovely kind of age bracket, that kind of 2002 up to 2009 bracket. So we have a little nose of number 3. Oh. So it's Port Charlotte. Of course, it's 40 ppm, aged in a bourbon barrel. I'll give you some of the details here. Distilled 2003, aged in bourbon again. In warehouse 14, aged in warehouse 14 through there. In fact, quite a lot of these whiskies were aged in warehouse 14 because warehouse 14 holds about 10,000 barrels, and it's specifically for aging bourbon barrels in there. So the racking that we have in warehouse 14, and these warehouses around about were built kind of many years ago. These barrels, this racking was built for maturing barrels this size. I was thinking about, again, when I noticed all of these whiskies were aging in warehouse 14, I was thinking about, obviously we spend a lot of time at the moment with building racking at the Cultorsa, our new kind of warehouse site for wine casks in different sizes. And I was thinking back to some of the days, the early days when I started working in the distillery, and there's another kind of point I'll come on to with this, why I'm telling this story. But warehouse 14, we have a lot of bourbon barrels in there, and of course we'll always all remember that period in the distillery's history when it was closed. So 1994 was the last year of production, and then it, of course, was mothballed, and only 2 people were left as caretakers at that time. A guy called John Rennie, who is a warehouseman, the late John Rennie, no longer with us. John and Budgie, who is definitely still with us down in the still house. The Budgie been with us since 1989. And these guys were kept on as caretakers, and what they were doing, at this time, Bruichladdich was owned by Invergordon, which also owned Jura Distillery at the time. So these 2 caretakers were kind of looking after the place. They were sending casks out, and actually what Invergordon were doing was storing a lot of the whiskey here because we've got massive warehouse space. So warehouse 14 was quite empty, so they would send over casks of Jura that had been filled, and they would be stored in Bruichladdich. So, of course, when we reopened, we had a huge stock of whiskey from other distilleries. Jura was one of the main ones. And when I joined the warehouse team back in 2006, at that point we started shipping that Jura back out again because we needed space for our own whiskey. And although we would get a rental income, so we would get a few pennies every week from each cask that was stored here, we needed space to put our whiskey, so we were sending the Jura whiskey away. And Jura were filling hogsheads at that time, and Budgie and John had been storing them in warehouse. And a hogshead is a bourbon barrel, but it's slightly bigger. So this holds 195 litres, bulk litres. A hogshead is made out of 4 bourbon barrels with the new heads to make it a little bit bigger, so we get 250 litres in each cask. So if you have a barrel that's 200 litres, it's a particular size. If you have a barrel that's 250 litres, it's a bit bigger, fatter, if you will. So Budgie and John had been for years kind of storing these hogsheads away in warehouse 14, and when we came to take them back out again, Joanne and the guys, we get a list that Jura wanted, so we'd then go and drop those casks. We'd take them out the stores, we'd drop them, we'd line them up on the floor, and 80 barrels would be loaded onto a lorry and shipped away. And the reason I mention that is that I'd like to, if we can, raise a little dram to a man called Bob Daly, who passed away recently. Bob, I spent many a year loading trailers with Bob, rolling casks in and making sure they were just the way he wanted them as we shipped those casks away. So again, just to Bob, all the best. And really, because the whiskey industry isn't built on people like me, head distillers, master distillers, whatever. It's about everyone playing a part, and it's not just the people at the distillery, it's about all the people who move stuff around the country, who do these jobs. So again, Bob's sadly missed. Anyway, coming back to the story, loading these trailers with Bob to get the casks out. We'd always do it a couple of days before so we could check the cask, make sure everything was ready when he turned up. But because they've been filling these hogsheads into the bourbon racking, sometimes they were quite big. We say 250 litres, but it could be 240 or it could be 260 or 70. And there was one particular time, what we used to do is we were rolling the casks out as they would occasionally, they would stick, the racking with the metal frame, the barrel would stick in there. And we'd have to get the next cask along, roll it, and then hit it and smash it out the stuck position. And so that was fine. We could do that until it was the very first cask that had been put in, or the last cask we're taking out. There's nothing left to move it. And quite often, the guys in the warehouse, myself included at the time, we would have to kind of climb into the racking and kind of kick it out, or try and get out somehow, or get it back out and turn it around, cut it and get out. It was just a nightmare, these things catching all the time. But there was one cask that I remember that was just horrific. It must have been about 300 litres, this hogshead. It was massive. And it was the first one that had been put into the rack. And as we got all the other casks out and rolling this one, the very first upright it hit, got stuck. So we had to kick it out, and eventually we got it. And then 2 or 3 uprights, it got stuck again, and we couldn't move it. We couldn't get it out. And again, I'm not the biggest guy, but working alongside us at the time was a guy called Grant McClellan, who was literally twice my height. I'm not joking. And so even he couldn't kick it out. He couldn't push it out. And so we went down to the workshop, and what tools what things have we got to cut this cask up or do something to get it out? And we found this old kind of rasp, this big kind of file, and we started shaving bits off the outside of the cask so that we could fit it through. And I remember then, after hours of getting this one cask out, I went down to see the budgie later on. I said, "You and John, you buggers, how did you? There was one cask in there." And he went, "Warehouse 14, 22H. I know the one, because we had a bastard of a time getting it in there." Took us days, he said. Took us days. But there we go. So yeah, a little funny story about the bourbon barrels there for you. Sorry, coming back to dram number 3. We're on Port Charlotte. We're calibrating. We're back to bourbon barrels. Again, with Port Charlotte, of course, it's heavily peated, as we know. Bruichladdich is unpeated. We, of course, in the reopening of the distillery, Port Charlotte was the very first spirit made, so it always has a special place in our heart. And Port Charlotte is a beautiful peated whiskey. And when you nose that, you almost don't notice that it's peated. At this age, at 20 years old, it's absolutely incredible. There's a little touch of peat. But what we're tasting, what we're nosing here, is some of the oldest Port Charlotte that we have. And this is the amazing thing that we have, and one of the great privileges that I have is being able to take these old vintages, these legacy whiskies, and put them into a bottle at the appropriate time. But it's always really interesting to because we never made Port Charlotte before. It was first made back in 2001, and we look and we think about how that whiskey develops and what that means, and this is amongst the oldest stocks of Port Charlotte that we have left. And it's really interesting to think of this as a time capsule, to think of this as a living being, as a living, breathing thing, maturing and developing all the time. So with that heavy level of peat, 40 ppm, what we've got there is that distillery character. So we think about Dram 1, think about that lovely, that kind of lovely bourbon cask maturation. So as we nose that, it's creme brulee, it's vanilla, it's milk chocolate, it's coconut. Coconut's a note we get from bourbon barrels. Again, it comes from the charring, the burning. It's a compound that comes out in the wood, usually after quite a long time. So the older vintages of Bruichladdich will always have that lovely coconut note. And that comes through really, really nicely. It's like Bounty bars, like that, the taste of paradise right here, Lovely milk chocolate, that lovely sweet coconut, that vanilla, that creme brulee. If you think about that again, I know this is heavily peated, but what I'm getting there is like primrose, it's buttercups, it's really floral. And the fruit, again. So we would have started off with a nice, smoky, rubbery new spirit. There's a note in the peated new spirit that we know as plasticine. So as kids in school, so back in the 80s when I was in primary school, and you get to do modeling clay and play with plasticine, it's a smell that plasticine has that sticks with you for years, And when you nose a young peated whiskey, you get that plasticine kind of note. That's gone in this whiskey, so we know that maturity is there. And that peat smoke is so gentle, it becomes just embers of peat. It's a really subtle burnt heather kind of smoke. It's not aggressive. It's not iodine. It's not overly smoked. It's absolutely beautiful. It's delicate. It's beautiful. Should we have a taste? Yeah. Sorry, I'll catch up with you again and have a taste. And it's tasting a dram like that makes me really glad. And really, it's why I started to focus on, yes, we've got the exciting cask types, but the bourbon cask just works so well with Bruichladdich spirit, with Port Charlotte spirit, with Octomore spirit. So there's a moment to kind of calibrate again, think about what that Port Charlotte is. I think I mentioned this is 56% alcohol. So again, these whiskies are punchy. At cask strength, these whiskies are punchy, but when we're nosing that and we're tasting that, it's not aggressive. It's got a lovely balance. It's got this lovely softness to it. Again, that distillation, that slow distillation, all of these kind of fundamentals, you can see even after 20 years in the cask, they have their place. They shape that spirit. So that distillery character is there again. Now, dram number 3 is a component, as I say, of our festival, or one of our festival releases. We have a Bruichladdich festival release, a Port Charlotte festival release. I wanted to deconstruct that Port Charlotte festival release, and so the two components of that Port Charlotte festival release are Dram 3 and Dram 4. So Dram 4, if we move into that one a little bit, you can see is a bit of a deeper, kind of richer color. Dram 4 is the Sauterne cask. Dram 4 is the Sauterne cask. And this is filled in 2002. This is one of the oldest Port Charlottes that we have. So it's 2002. It's cask number 1198, which is down in warehouse number 6. It's a Sauterne cask, the premium Sauterne. And back in 2002, again, you think about what we've done over the years with cask maturation. This is one of the very first kind of wine casks we would have filled, really, in the first couple of years. So to take that new spirit, that Port Charlotte new spirit, and to fill it into a first fill Sauterne. So it had held Sauterne for maybe 2 fills. So a brand new French oak cask, then used for aging Sauterne, and then filled with Bruichladdich new spirit. That's not the kind of thing that's done every day. Oh, my goodness. God, you try and have a quiet whiskey tasting, and there's always a bloody photographer somewhere, isn't there? As long as you don't fall off the ladder, Ben, you're all right. I got a really shock, because Ben's obviously a great photographer. He's done lots of photography this morning, but I got a real shock when I woke up this morning, and there he was at the end of the bed taking pictures. It was... It was a real moment, Yeah. How he got in the house, I don't know, but anyway. So coming back to this, the Sauterne cask, as I say, the French oak it's absolutely incredible that you would fill something like this, because we're well known for using wine casks, but at this point it was still quite new. You go back kind of this 20 years in the whiskey industry. And what we take for granted now in terms of cask types wasn't always commonplace. It wasn't always what was happening. So it would be a lot of bourbon, a little bit of sherry, maybe some port or Madeira, and that was about it. So using, and I look at Simon here, using the wine cask and thinking about the quality of the wood is the most important thing. And I think you'll agree when you look at that color, when you nose that whiskey. That's something really special. Again, the challenge here is to try and find that distillery character in amongst that peat, in amongst that first fill Sauterne, but it's definitely there. So from that Sauterne cask, that French oak is incredible. I mean, that color is coming from the French oak. So French oak and American oak are very different. The American oak, as you talked about, the Quercus alba. For French oak, we're thinking more about Quercus petraea. It's a different kind of style, a different type of oak, a different species of oak, a different grain type. So whereas the American oak is a really tight grain, When the American oak is made up of flavors that give us those vanillins and those coconut flavors, those clove notes, those lovely caramel. The French oak is very, very different. So the French oak, depending on how you toast, and this is really where the coopering becomes, that science of coopering becomes really, really interesting. How you manipulate that wood to release certain flavors is incredible. And so with the American oak, where it's burnt and it's charred, the French oak is toasted more often than not. And so it releases the flavors in a different way. And when we nose this, and you think about that ginger, that nutmeg, that kind of spices, that coffee, you get that lovely kind of like rich black coffee note, freshly brewed. Get that, Leslie? Yeah. Good, yes. Got another one. But there's these lovely notes that you bring from the wood. And the skill, the balance, I suppose, is about making sure that we retain that distillery character. So we're thinking about the fruit, we're thinking about that floral nature, and we're thinking about that kind of lovely kind of sweetness, again, that malty sweetness. So we have a little taste. Slanger. Now that is a beautiful whiskey. Is that a good whiskey? Yes? Yes? Good. That sweetness, that fruit, the way that when you nose it, it's got a certain dimension. When you taste it, there's a whole other range of flavors open up. And what you really get is the fruit. That lovely, succulent, kind of sweet, ripe fruit. So we're thinking pineapple, mango, peach, lovely ripe peach. That syrup, sultanas, dates, figs, there's an element of that in there as well. But it's really that lovely, succulent fruit. So you think about the sauterne. I'm so glad you guys are all enjoying it so much. It's really good. It's really good. So you think about that lovely sweetness, that lovely fruit. It's taking those fruits we have at the distillation. Because when we make Port Charlotte, we don't make it differently from Bruichladdich. It's the same. Same style, the same process. Cuts are tight. We're not trying to make this whiskey as peaty as possible. We're trying to make a really clean, elegant spirit, and we see where that peat smoke fits in. And it's elegant. And that peat smoke only now is starting to come through on the palate. It's only now starting to open up. And so, Dram number 3 and Dram number 4, when we combine those, and I'm not suggesting that you tip glasses into it. You can if you want, by all means, but what you could also do is buy a couple of bottles of a festival bottle, the Port Charlotte Festival bottle, where I've already done that for you. And but actually what was really interesting there was to create that breadth of flavor and think a little bit about blending and those flavor creations and what really works to bring the balance to a whiskey. And that Port Charlotte Festival bottle, that 20-year-old, it's the oldest Port Charlotte we have ever released. And it's a really, really incredible expression. And these are the two components that go together to make that. And so that's a really interesting thing to think about, how those flavors come together, how they complement each other. Think about that lovely succulent fruit that we have in Dram number 4, that lovely French oak, that spice that we really get from the wood. And with Dram number 3, when you come back to Dram number 3, citrus. It's lemon rind. It's this lovely lemon meringue pie. It's got this lovely pastry sweetness. So for those of you who've already finished Dram number 3, Christian, you still got some left. Good man. Good man. So Christian and I actually, in preparation for this tasting, because obviously I'm a serious athlete, and I take this very seriously, in preparation for this tasting, I went out for a curry last night. I met Christian, so luckily the mic has not picked up any untoward noises from that curry. But it was very, very good, and it was nice to spend a bit of time with Christian and the guys there. So there we go. Now that's thrown me right off my stride. Does anyone happen to know how we're doing for time? Because I didn't bring a watch. quarter past. So does it, 12 minutes past. So how long have we got? An hour? Oh my God. I'm just wondering if we might have time for a wee tune. Yeah? We're really lucky to have a very accomplished accordion player with us this morning. So, for many years, I've thought about doing the masterclass and how, years gone by when Jim used to do the masterclass, how we'd always get someone up singing, and this is the Festival of Malta Music on Islay, so we should have some music in amongst it. I didn't know any musicians when I started doing the masterclass. I still don't now. But I always thought it'd be really good to get some musicians in and have some music and break it up, but it turns out I quite like the sound of my own voice. So I've monopolized the masterclass for many years. But I think, seeing as we have Ian here with his accordion, it'd be really nice if we could get a wee tune out of you, Ian, if that's all right. I don't know how this will work for sound later on, but we'll all hear it in the room, so that's what counts. A wee quick one, absolutely. Thank you. Oh, man. That was superb. Thank you very much, Ian. Thank you very much indeed. What an anticlimax the next two drams are going to be after that. Oh, goodness me. Well, no, thank you very much. I think that's again, that's what this is all about, isn't it? Having some fun. So thank you very much, Ian, for playing a wee tune there for us. Oh no, next year it's all music. Ian's doing the masterclass next year, just all tunes. It'll be great. You'll love it. So, thank you for that musical interlude. And now to dram number 5. I was trying to figure out again what time we were, how long we've got. I've no idea. It's all fine. If we're late down for the masterclass, late down for the festival, absolutely fine. So dram number 5, we are going to look for that distillery character again in some Octomore. Some Octomore, again, has everyone tried Octomore before? Yeah? Good. So Octomore, as you know, is the world's most heavily peated whiskey. Octomore is the one whiskey that you should not enjoy, okay? Octomore doesn't work. It's too peaty, it's too strong, and it's too young. Okay? So you don't like Octomore, it doesn't work. Because that's, if we know anything about whiskey, then it's too young, too strong, too peaty. Octomore, as we know, was created back in 2002 from that idea and that kind of freedom, that creativity, where in the early days of Bruichladdich, hey, look, we want to make peated whiskey, absolutely. And Eddie over there maybe remembers the conversation with Jim a little bit. We're very lucky to have Eddie with us today from, now retired from Baird's. I didn't know you were coming, but I definitely spotted you there earlier on, Eddie, so nice to see you. But in those conversations about how they produce peated malt, Octomore kind of sprang, because what they do is they make a really heavily concentrated batch of malt, and heavily peated malt, and then blend it with unpeated to give each distilling customer the specific level of peat they want, which is great, and of course that means you get a consistent product, but to whiskey makers like Jim McEwen, when somebody says you've got this super, super heavy level of peat, the question is, well, what does that taste like when you make whiskey out of it? So Octomore was born from this, let's just try it and see. And as we know from each of the releases over the years with Octomore, it changes, that level of phenols evolves. So with Port Charlotte, we always have 40 ppm in our malt that's consistent. With Octomore, as long as it's above 80, we'll call it Octomore. And there may be a batch, in years to come that drops below 80, and we question ourselves, is it Octomore? It's made in the style of Octomore. Is it lower than 80? Who knows? That's for the future. But really what we've done with this is push those boundaries of peat and really kind of think about how those flavors, that peated, that lovely kind of smoky notes, how that affects, how that sits in our spirit. And actually releasing it at 5 years at cask strength, at that full kind of heavy level of peat, it's been really interesting because it gets people thinking, because we trust our skills of distillation. We know we're going to distill well. We know we're going to use good casks. So actually 5 years, well-distilled spirit in a good cask, 5 years is good. We make good spirit. We're not cutting any corners at any point. When we think about that high strength, again, it's less dilution. Think about all these whiskies we've tasted, and you look at the legs. You go back to any one of these whiskies, at cask strength, there's less water added or no water added, and you can see that viscosity in the liquid. Okay? So that's really important when we think about a 5-year-old Octomore release. It's the viscosity in the liquid, it's the oils, it's the distillation that we're showcasing, it's the quality of the whiskey that we're showcasing. However, with this whiskey, this was distilled back in 2006. Okay? So this may very well be the oldest Octomore that you will ever have tasted. I'm willing to bet money that it is. Aged in bourbon barrels, again. Oh, I like the support of all your friends there who are pointing you out. Absolutely. Not, oh, here, let me share my dram with you. No, it was him that did it. It's okay. It's okay. Absolutely fine. You'll just have to imagine what we're going to taste now, okay? So with this Octomore, when we nose this, it's 2006 distilled. The strength here is, again, 56%, so you'll notice that through the tasting, naturally the strength is around about that 55-56% alcohol. Okay? We've not altered the strengths of any of these whiskies. In that kind of age profile, that's what we would expect at Bruichladdich, and it's, again, when you nose that, and you get that lovely bourbon cask style. So again, we've got the vanilla, we've got the caramel, but it's really showcasing the fruit. Again, that kind of distillery character, which I think is that thread that we want to pull with all of these whiskies. That's what we want to be looking for. It's clean, it's fresh, and it's fruity. That lovely kind of floral notes as well. And actually, for something that, if I tell you the ppm, so this was distilled back in 2006, when that malt was created. Eddie, you'll remember exactly what the ppm was in 2006? Yes, he does, yeah. But it was 160, wasn't it? Yeah, 160. 160 ppm in the malt when this was made. And here we stand today, after 17 years maturation, and those phenols are not the dominant factor in that whiskey. It's balanced. They're there. We know it's a peated whiskey. But that bourbon cask, that distillery character is holding up those high levels of peat. And it's giving us a beautiful balance. Again, I'll catch up with you guys and have a little taste, so Slanger. Is that not a beautiful whiskey? Is that not a beautiful whiskey? But don't forget that it's only in a bourbon cask, okay? It's only in a bourbon cask. The point I will labor again, that actually it's the backbone of what we do, and we use it for a reason because it really allows the flavor of our spirit to come through. It really allows the quality of that distillation, all of those years of work. Again, as we say, we throw barley in the ground, it doesn't just make whiskey. There's the coopers, the maltsters, the distillers, the warehousemen, the blenders, everyone involved in making that whiskey shapes it into what it is today. And we calibrate with that Octomore, that 2006. For the next part, I'm really going to need your attention, okay? So, I know, you know, the Masterclass is always amazing whiskeys, and I think that those 5 whiskeys we've tasted are fantastic. You know, it's, again, for me, that privilege of going into the warehouse and being able to select whiskeys, you know, like every cask we go to is incredible. Every cask that we go to is good. It might not be ready yet when you go to it, but you know the quality of that spirit, you know the quality of that wood. There are no corners cut here. Everything is fantastic. It's really interesting to kind of pull from this age, this kind of 2002 up to 2009, this spirit. But this last cask, so Dram number 2, I was really keen to get into the tasting because all those years ago it just really stood out. Calmed my nerves, but also really, really stood out. But Dram number 6 was I will admit, a slightly overlooked cask. So with Octomore, it's very difficult to make. We don't make very much Octomore at all, okay? It's very difficult and also very expensive. Eddie, very expensive to get the malt. But when we distill with it, I think you'll agree, it makes amazing whiskey. It's very difficult to make. There's only small amounts. So when we look back through that very first distillation in 2002, we only have 2 casks remaining. In 2003, we have 3 casks remaining. In 2004, we've bottled it all. There is nothing left. 2005, half a dozen casks. So when we taste this whiskey, this is an Octomore distilled in 2003. Okay? So this will be the oldest Octomore you'll ever have tasted, okay? When you taste a whiskey like this, it's quite magical, okay? And please just nose, taste, dive in. I'll talk about the flavor profile and all that kind of stuff as we go, but don't wait for me. This is absolutely incredible because this whiskey, I tasted this a few weeks ago, or a few months ago, sorry. And I'm kind of guilty of overlooking this 2003 because it was aging in bourbon barrels in Warehouse 14, 12B, and Warehouse 14, Store 12B. And because it was in bourbon, I kind of thought, it's fine, nothing's going wrong with it, everything's cool, it'll be all right. But I went to have a look at that cast, just looking at the Octomore, seeing there was only 3 casts of 2003. I know I hadn't looked at it for years. I'll go and have a look and see how it's developing. I've overlooked that. And I looked at it, and it's not a first fill. This whiskey's been on a bit of a journey. Distilled in 2003, it was filled into refill bourbon hogsheads. Hogsheads, as you know, don't fit in Warehouse 14. Some do. But it was recast into a variety of different things. So that initial filling, that initial refill cask was filled into some fresh bourbon casks. It was filled into some Spanish red wine casks from a specific kind of chateau in Spain. And then it was recast again. So only after a few months, after being in those Spanish red wine casks, it was recast into a really top Bordeaux chateau, a really fantastic kind of pedigree of cask. And it stayed in those casks for a few months. Jim, obviously, at the time decided that he would, this young whiskey, only kind of 4 years old, it stayed, it'd been in bourbon, then into the Spanish red wine, and then into these beautiful, incredible red wine casks. And then it was bottled, or some of it was bottled. It was bottled as, you may remember, some of you guys who were into the Octomore and the numbering and know the history of Bruichladdich, you may remember a whiskey called Orpheus. Yeah? Yeah? So Orpheus, Orpheus, one of the first release, or the first release we did that had been aged in, obviously the first Octomore release was aged in bourbon, the second was aged in bourbon, the third release, the Octomore 2.2, was in these red wine casks, and that was Orpheus, and it became a legendary whiskey because there was just nothing like it. A 5-year-old whiskey aged in this kind of fashion. It was absolutely incredible. And after that, what was left, what wasn't bottled, was recast into first fill bourbon, and then it was tucked away in warehouse 14. And here it is today. So this whiskey is a lovely combination of that red wine maturation that really kind of made that Orpheus, but also the next 15 years in first fill bourbon. So it neatly kind of sums up some of the things that we've been talking about with the bourbon cask and the wine cask, and brings all together. And it's a blend. It's not a single cask. It's bringing all of these different components together. And when you look at that beautiful color, again, thank you, Moira, for a lovely, healthy measure of this one. And when you nose that, that is like nothing else, like no other whiskey out there. 21 years, Octomore, the oldest Octomore you will probably ever taste. Absolutely amazing. That viscosity, that nose. Let's have a taste. When that whiskey hits the palate, that is stunning. Absolutely stunning. Oh. Thank you very much, folks. It's a really nice dram to finish on, a nice dram to work up to. And again, along with dram number 2, this is one of the ones that I think is the treasures. It's those jewels, those amazing whiskies that we have. Now, not everybody in the world will be able to taste this. Again, this may be a whiskey that we keep here, pay the duty on, and sample ourselves. But it's a real privilege. No, these whiskies, they are amazing things. And again, they represent so much of the history and the heritage and the things. Again, I always talk about whiskey as a way of time traveling. So when we taste a whiskey like this, we know it was made in 2003, and we go back to that time, and it was so different to what we enjoy today with Bruichladdich. It was so different to such different times, but always that whiskey was made in the same way, with love, with care, with passion, with attention, with the spirit of creativity, and it's something we always endeavor to continue, and we look forward to, we take inspiration from as we move forward. And ultimately with whiskey, the most important thing is about people. It's about the people who make it. So whiskey represents the people that make it, but it's also about the people who drink it. And thank you very much for enjoying our spirit. Thank you. So, before we go, my last thing, I just want to say a few thank yous, if I may. First of all, thank you to all of you for enjoying and coming to the Masterclass today. Enjoy the rest of the day. It's a fantastic day we put on. The weather will be what the weather will be. As long as we enjoy it, we'll be absolutely fine. Thank you for the team here who've put this together. The rest of the day together as well. Thank you. And lastly, if I may, thank you to Amy, my wife, for I always get very, very nervous. For this event, I always I'm a nightmare to live with for a good month beforehand. So thank you very much. And again, everyone, have a lovely day, and thank you very much. Cheers.